Hello, comrades! It is I, Robert, with Backwards R, coming to you to talk about latest state-issued movie, Superman Red Son, now available on Blu-ray disc, manufactured for capitalist consumer pig dogs to purchase. I do not know how to get out of this character, so we move on to next segment, yes? So Superman Red Son is DC's latest animated Superman movie, while we wait for them to put out movies about their other heroes. What else is new? Though admittedly, after the gauntlet of Batman movies they've put out over the years, I'm happy that they're doing some more Superman stuff. So I guess I'll allow it until they start mass producing those. So Superman Red Son is based off of the comic book of the same name written by Mark Millar, and as usual I've not read it. Surprise, surprise. I did read up on it a little bit, and I know that they did change a few things. I know the story of the comic is much bigger than the movie. I know the comic continues on long after where the movie leaves off. But I'm just going to put up my usual disclaimer in saying that I'm just going to be judging this as it is. So this is an Elseworld story where Superman, instead of landing in Smallville and being raised by Ma and Pa Kent, grew up in the Soviet Union. So he lends his power to the state and thinks he's doing a lot of good, but then he finds out that Joseph Stalin is not the great leader that he says he is, and commits many, many atrocities. So Superman does the only logical thing and kills him, and now he rules the Soviet Union, whether they like it or not. So the voice acting in this is fantastic. Most notably Jason Isaacs as Superman, who is just so good in this because there's a lot of sincerity behind his performance, and it made the movie just that much more disturbing because of, you know, all the things Superman did. There's a lot of alumni voice actors in this as well, and I think DC does like to be consistent when it comes to its voice actors. For example, Phil Lamar reprises his role as Jon Stewart, even though he really wasn't in the movie for that long. But I think at this point a lot of people really associate him with the character. Vanessa Marshall plays Wonder Woman in this movie, and she's played Wonder Woman a couple of times before. And I believe she's played other characters in different DC animated stuff. Paul Williams, who's another great voice actor, is the voice of Brainiac in this movie, and he was the voice of the Penguin in Batman the Animated Series. Now, the only one I really thought was kind of strange was Diedrich Bader, who's played a couple of characters in DC. He was Batman in Batman the Brave and the Bold. He also was the voice of Guy Gardner in the Green Lantern Animated Series, but in this movie, he was Lex Luthor. And I love Diedrich Bader and everything, but I don't think that was the right role for him. He does a fine job, don't get me wrong, but it was just weird hearing his voice as Lex Luthor. It just didn't feel right. So the story takes place over several decades, from the 1940s all the way to the 1980s. And there's references to actual historical figures and historical events, but of course they play out much differently. I've always been fascinated by alternate history, like if things had played out differently, you know, where would we be now? And I always also like to see alternate versions of beloved characters like Superman, who in the Soviet Union was raised, you know, around hardship and horrible things happening, which is a stark contrast to how he was raised, you know, in Smallville, because that's always been a part of his character, you know. He was raised with wholesome American values, and that's what turned him into the Boy Scout we know and love. And seeing him in a completely different environment was interesting as much as it was disturbing. In fact, this movie reminded me of another animated DC movie that came out a while ago, Justice League Gods and Monsters, that I reviewed a long, long time ago. In this one, we have the Justice League, but they're not as cool as the Justice League from the main Earth. They're much more aggressive and dark, and Superman was raised by immigrants, again, instead of Ma and Pa Kent, and he grew up in a harsh environment, and that turned him into kind of a tyrannical leader. So it should be pretty obvious that this movie gets political, for those of you who are, let's say, uncomfortable with that. I don't really mind it as long as it's done with a certain finesse and subtlety, because I feel like that's much more of an effective way to do something like that. And there were a few moments in this movie where they were not subtle at all. For example, there's a part where Lex Luthor creates a clone Superman, which I thought was a pretty clever take on Bizarro. And when he's debuted to the public, the first thing he says is, "America first." Yeah, real subtle, guys. There's also another scene where Wonder Woman is talking to Superman, and she's going on about how the world of men is full of hatred and war and everything like that. And his first response to that is, "Not all men." Yeah, again, little subtlety, please. The one strangest thing about this movie, though, is how they handled the Green Lanterns. So there's a part where they find an alien dead with a Green Lantern ring. I assume it's supposed to be Abin Sur, but he looks a little bit different. And Lex Luthor takes the ring off of him and basically reverse engineers it, and they create a kind of like an Air Force squadron of Green Lanterns for America to fight off Soviet Superman. And my first thought about that was, does the Guardians not know about this? Do the Guardians not care about somebody taking the Green Lantern power and using it for their own personal gain? Maybe this has happened in a comic before, I don't know, but I feel like that would have gotten some attention. I know the Guardians are not the best, but maybe even, other members of the Corps would have had something to say about this. Although it was kind of cool seeing Hal Jordan, Jon Stewart, and Guy Gardner working together in a DC animated project. I don't believe we've seen the three of them together before. It's usually like two of them, or, usually someone solo. But yeah, that was kind of cool, even though it didn't last very long. There's also an alternate origin story for Batman in this, and man, is it really good. A shame we didn't really get to see much of it. But despite a few minor complaints, I did really enjoy this movie. It does have an agenda, but I think it's a very good one. It seems to mostly be a cautionary tale about tyranny. There wasn't even really much of a good guy in this movie. Even though America was kind of painted as being the good guys in this, they did show that there are a lot of things that even America does that are still not really cool, which I think especially lately hits a little too close to home. And on the opposite end of the spectrum, you have Superman, who, while he did bring a lot of prosperity to the Soviet Union, you do have to ask at what cost, because he does not see the wrong that he's doing. And that is, again, going back to the performance of Jason Isaacs, a really strong point of this movie. You might be able to close the poverty gap and have a booming industry, but then you start attaching electrodes to the brains of people who disagree with you, because my way is the correct way, and I'm just trying to help you, goddammit! Can't you see? Yeah, that's not cool. Don't do that. It's a very interesting character study because he truly does not see the wrong he's doing. He's forgotten the human side of society, and he only sees the progress, which makes this a very, very dark universe. And I highly recommend you watch it. But that's all I got for Superman Red Son. Leave a comment below and let me know what you thought of it. My name is Rob, and have a wonderful day.